We all care about something. The interesting question is why? Pull up a chair. It's time to question everything. Welcome to the show. A guy that I have known not as long as my last guest, Kevin Huntsberger, but close to it. We worked in news as well, and he's the co-host of the Still Up All Night podcast, looking at the films featured on the Still Up All Night TV show. But we're going to talk sports more than movies in this episode. Please welcome my guest, Travis Yates. Travis, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chad. Yes, thanks. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about today's topic. So near and dear to my heart, as you very well know.
That's why I had you on the show, because when I was looking at sports, people that I know that were into sports, instead of calling up the sports announcers that we used to work with, I figured they don't know anything about sports. They just give scores and tell you what happened in a game. I want someone who knows, who's there on the ground. But so let's start at the start, I guess. Football. I know you're a huge football fan. Have you always been a football fan?
I have. And, it comes from my mother, surprisingly, not my dad. My dad was a musician, wasn't really into sports at all. But my mom was a huge football fan. She grew up actually following the Cowboys. And I remember even as I was a little guy running around the house, and I had this little Cowboys jersey. It might have been Tony Dorsett. I can't remember who the player was, but I was running around with football jerseys on, and I was drawn to the game from the first time I saw it. There's so much excitement happening on the field, and so so I just always was a fan. And then, of course, you see the Bears jersey that I'm wearing. Growing up in Chicago in the 80s, and specifically in 1985. So, I mean, what a time to be alive for a football fan. If you were there and you don't like football, you're either no longer with us or you don't have a pulse. You better check it. So,
I was going to say, you're talking about your mom being a Cowboys fan. I'm guessing, I grew up child, late 70s, early 80s. We were Cowboys fans at the time because Roger Staubach. But do I know who Roger Staubach was at that time? Absolutely not. I didn't know he had a school down in Arlen, Texas named after him. It was just, they were America's team, and you had the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, which were everywhere. So, do you think that was part of your mom's reasoning for being a fan, or?
Absolutely. It really was America's team. That moniker was well earned by those Cowboys teams, and they had fans across the country. It's why even still today, you see so many Cowboys fans, even though their past couple decades haven't been all that great. And so it goes back to the heydays that when they were truly America's team. And I think it was easy for a lot of younger football fans to get caught up in that fandom and have a team to follow and people around them that also shared in that excitement. And so,
I think that's one of the aspects of fandom that have looked at, have tried to realize or try to figure out why people become fans of specific teams. And I would say the number one leading cause is location, just like in real estate. It's wherever you're from, that local team is probably going to be the team you go for. However, as with the Cowboys, if you look at baseball, I think the Braves and the Cubs are probably two of the more popular nationwide teams due to the due to cable TV in the late 70s or 80s when you had WGN and TBS. So those were two teams you could see basically wherever you lived. Yeah. You weren't just focusing on the local market. So I guess that I know you're a Bears fan. You grew up Bears fan. I'm going to jump ahead a few years, maybe. You become a Bengals fan.
Yeah.
But you're in Illinois. Yeah. To my knowledge, you never lived in Cincinnati.
No. So the thing about fandom is this. It is. You mentioned location. It is very much a communal thing, right? It is community, and so the community you live in, if you're following your hometown team, you've got people to share in that. So being a fan is also, you automatically are part of a community, and you connect with complete strangers just if they're wearing the same jersey as you. So it transcends socioeconomic standards, race standards, all these things that people might otherwise let them, think differently about people. But if you've got a jersey of the right team on or a hat of the right team, you're getting a high five, you're getting a hey, all right, fist bump, no matter where you are, who it is. And so there's that. But then it's also very individual, because every day you wake up and you make a choice to follow that team or the teams. And so I think I am a great case in point of that, of where I choose my fandom carefully. Fan is short for fanatic, right? So, and I am a fanatic. When I follow a team or a player, I go all in. Yeah. And so growing up in Chicago, obviously following the Bears, but the Bears slowly dismantled that 85 team through 1988 and 1989. And them trading Jim McMahon, who was my absolute favorite player as a kid, that just was a dagger in my heart and a stab in the back from Chicago. I cannot believe you've done this with this team. And so it was my first kind of wake-up call to, I have a choice here. I can sit and I can be mad at this team, or I can enjoy watching football every Sunday. And for me then, for several years, I just followed McMahon. Wherever I've got my very first jersey that amazingly still fits me today. So I followed him when he went to San Diego. I watched San Diego on Sundays when I could, depending on at this time. We didn't have Sunday ticket back in the 90s. So, and then the Eagles, and then the Vikings. And so that's kind of where I took my fandom. And yeah, I always followed the Bears, see what was going on with them. But my day-to-day, excitement was with whichever team McMahon was with. So he was winding down his career in 1995 and 96. He'd become a backup, and I went to Purdue, and my college roommate was from Cincinnati and had season tickets. And so, there was this weird situation where he and a buddy had season tickets, and there was one empty seat between them and the next people, and so the seat was always open. And so he said, "Why don't you, get this seat every game, and you come down to the games with us?" And this was the mid '90s Bengals, so they were bad. I mean, probably almost every season the worst team in the league. But it was so fun. The fans, despite how bad they were, this was my introduction to tailgating, and so I just sort of fell in love with the lovable losers known as the mid '90s Cincinnati Bengals, and so. That's how I became a Bengals fan, and ended up getting season tickets with my roommate, and spent several years, just in agony every Sunday, but loving every minute of it.
Yeah, I guess that does play a factor too. Like you said, you're not alone. So I know, like when I had LA Kiss season tickets, they weren't around long enough to make friends with anybody else in the games, and I remember going to the first game, and the person sitting next to me just complained about how small the seats were the entire time. It's like, okay, great, that's not really what we're here for. But real quick, going back to Jim McMahon, you followed him everywhere. Do you think he should have been a bigger star after his cameo in Johnny Be Good?
Of course, absolutely. I mean, he showed that he could do it all. He had the acting chops. People forget, or maybe they remember if they're our age. He was one of the biggest stars in football. He was all over television. He was all over commercials. He was all over the late night talk shows. And, he was the face of that just amazing 1985 Bears team that probably had the most personality of any team in the history of a Super Bowl team. And so, if he wanted to, all joking aside, he certainly could have probably worked his way into additional movies, but he's I don't think he had the patience for that. He wanted to be off playing golf and drinking beer somewhere.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe team him up with Brian Boswell, and
the Boz,
the Boz. They could have been the Laurel and Hardy, the whole new generation. It's a weird one. So one of the aspects about football that I wanted to get into with you is, again, I became a fan, and I'm saying fan of football, in 1985, actually going off the Bears game. Mm-hmm. They played a Monday night game against the Miami Dolphins. I was in 6th grade. I had a bookie in my class who was taking bets on the game. I didn't know anything about football. I knew everybody was going for the Bears, so the Dolphins had the better, odds of winning more if you bet on them. So I bet on the Dolphins. The Dolphins win. For the last now almost 40 years, I've been a Dolphins fan. We'll get into long-term suffering later on.
Yeah.
Talk about the Bengals. But come to find out that I didn't realize the only game the Chicago Bears lost that Super Bowl season was the game to the Dolphins on Monday night. And then I believe they recorded the Super Bowl shuffle a few days later, if I have my time frame correct in that.
Yes,
but,
that is correct.
that was like their motivation to be like, no, we are going to go to the Super Bowl and we're going to win. But through my years of watching football, I just kind of watch. I just follow, I'll see who wins. Like, did the team win? Did they lose? Did the Patriots win or lose? Do we have bragging rights this season at least? But I know for you, football is a much more in-depth fandom. You mentioned being a fanatic. I don't know all the details, so fill me in. But I know every year there's an NFL draft. But most fans, I think, just watch the draft and hope for their team to pick the best player. You go a step further before the draft, or at least you used to. I don't know if you're still doing it. Tell me about your draft preparation.
Yeah, so, the first, I knew the NFL draft existed prior to the 90s, but after the 1991 season, that draft was the first draft that I actually just sat down in front of a television and watched it start to finish both days, because back then it was on a Saturday and a Sunday. And, talk about the ultimate reality show, predating reality by quite a bit, save for the real world. And, it was just amazing to see these players and the emotions and then the reactions from the pundits and the team, either defending or, celebrating picks and trades and everything. I mean, it was just, as a football fan, this is something that you should be into hardcore if you're not, because one, it's right smack in the middle between of the off season when there's nothing going on, and so you've got that, and then it gives you something to kind of focus on as far as what players to follow, who you might like in the future, that sort of thing. So I was hooked from the first draft that I watched on television from start to finish. That was I haven't missed one since. And so, and then in mid 90s, of course, like I said, becoming a fan of Cincinnati and realizing the reason that one of the many reasons they were so bad for so long was because they'd botch every draft. And I thought, they're screwing this up so bad, I can do this. And so I started going back and watching college games and taking notes and marking down players and that sort of thing. And then I'd compile a top 10 list. And then I think it was maybe 1995 when I compiled my first draft guide, which was done on a Xerox copier, because we're dealing with word processors still. I didn't have a home computer yet at this point. And I didn't want to mess with the busy computer lab at school. So, and so I even went as far as mailing it to Cincinnati, to the owner. And he took the time to write me back after the draft, defending their picks and why they didn't go with people I liked. And I thought, maybe this is another reason why you're so bad. Why are you writing me back? Don't take the time to write this random fan who's telling you who to pick. So anyway, that I did that, and then it went from a kind of a top 10 list at each position to then I started, really producing like 30-page guides that had in-depth notes on all the top 10 players and sleepers and a mock draft and all that fun stuff. And so I haven't done it for a few years now that life has gotten busier, but yeah, for 15, 20 some odd years I would do a draft guide every year. And it prepped me for the draft. So when the 7th round came around, when you're on that, very end of the draft, you still have players that you want to see your team get drafted. And so it makes just makes the draft even more exciting than it was before.
Did you only do it for a specific team, or was it for the entire league?
Yeah, I did it for me. I would send a little separate thing when I was mailing things to the Bengals. I would create a special thing for them, but the draft guide itself was basically just and it's basically what we see now on YouTube. Content creators are doing this now just via video, but this was on paper and digitally when I would produce it as a PDF. And it was just basically, this is it. This is the upcoming draft in a nutshell. These are players to look for. So it doesn't matter who your team was. You could grab it and you could, thumb through it and be like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that he had that many yards and he had that many broken tackles. And, here's some sleepers that I'm going to look for, that sort of thing. So, yeah, it was just kind of, it didn't apply to one single team.
Okay. That's where I guess I was confused with your draft, as I thought it was like a draft order. Like, this guy should go number one. This guy should go. This team should draft this player. But
I did do
more of just a. Okay.
I did have an article within the guide that was a mock draft, and then it would justify why I thought each team should pick a player. Yeah. So there was a section of it that was in there like that. Yeah.
Okay. Mentioning mailing it to the Bengals, another fandom that we have in common is wrestling, which, again, the last episode had Kevin Hunsberger from My 123 Cents on. We all know each other wrestling. We attended WrestleMania 28 together. But, over the years, people have told me, like, oh, you should go try to work for WWE or AEW, TNA. And I'm like, no, I don't think I would like that, especially because I have friends who have worked for those companies. Have you thought about trying to work with a team? And do you think if you did work in the NFL confines, would it hamper your fandom at all?
Yeah, a little bit, and not necessarily. It wouldn't hamper my fandom. It would hamper the time that I have to commit to being a fan, because I'd be working. And I did this a while back. I wrote for a short time for a website, Pro Football Network. And I did some fantasy articles weekly, and I did a fantasy podcast, but I was also the Cincinnati Bengals beat writer. And, so on Sundays, I'd have to be ready if, something huge happened. Players get injured, I'm running to the computer to write an article on it. And I'm a football fan. I want to be, watching football from sun up to sundown. And so working in and that would apply to anything, right? I mean, working in the field that you're in, you do get to see a little bit of how the sausage is made, which is fine. I mean, we're in TV. We know this by now, so there's nothing real surprising about that. But I think for me, it's taking time away from being a fan, and I'm too big of a fan to then put all my time to working on Sunday or working on draft day when I want to be either at a game or plop down in front of the television watching.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny you mentioned that, because in the conversation that I had with Kevin, which, spoiler for people watching, we are recording this before any of those interviews have come out, so Travis has not seen it, but we talk about working in television, seeing how the sausage is made, and how I said that's, for film and television, that has kind of killed my interest in a lot of newer, shows or films, because of stuff that I see in the industry and have to deal with in the industry. So I totally get it. It's like, they say if you love what you do, you never work, but I think also if you work in what you love, it doesn't work either. It's
That's
like,
great.
You can't, I don't think you can, I mean, I'm sure there are people who do, but I think also if you really want to love something, you have to separate the bad, in a sense, from it, and unfortunately, I don't know where this topic's going to go. It just came to mind. But separating the bad from football. Well, let's look at football. There's a lot of, just say, disciplinary actions that have taken place. Does that affect fandom? If you're a fan of a team or a player and then they go and do something, do you have them? This may be like a personal thing where I don't know if you want to go into it, but okay.
I can.
I was going to say, is there a moral conundrum?
Yes, there can be, and this is where that individual part comes into play, where you wake up every day and decide. And I remember years ago, I slowly fell out of love with the Bengals, and one of the reasons was their penchant for getting players on the cheap because they had issues in their past. And one of the high-profile signings was Adam Pac-Man Jones. And after, I don't know how many of the multitude of things that he'd done, the Bengals called me, and the ticket rep that I'd worked with in the past called me and said, "Hey, I see you haven't gotten tickets yet for this season. Are you going to be?" We didn't have season tickets at the time, but we'd usually go to a game or two. And he said, "Are you coming to a game?" And I was honest. I said, "Look, I'm not coming to a game this year. I'm not spending money on the team," because they had just re-signed him after he had done just another just really despicable thing and punched a woman or something. I can't remember what it was. And I said, I can't
thought you were
do
going to bring up
it.
the TNA Tag Team Championship.
That was also despicable, but for different reasons. And so, I hung up on that call feeling okay about myself, but also conflicted, because I'm like, man, I've been following this team for years, and it's fun to support them, but boy, how long can I continue to do this knowing that that they're doing these things? And so certainly that is a decision, and that was one of the reasons where I finally had it and moved on from Cincinnati. So yeah, it does become it can become an issue, and that's for every single fan to decide for themselves.
Yeah, I know. As a Dolphins fan, again, just 40 years of mediocrity, basically. But then when they sign players like Richie Incognito and I'm not going to attempt to pronounce his first name.
Ndamukong Suh? Is that who you're talking about?
Suh. That's it. It's Suh. You're like I want to support the team, but these players are not what I want. If they're going to win or lose, I want to do it with some dignity, and I don't know. Yeah, and then it becomes that thing. But then also, it's to separate the art from the artist, I guess. And it's like,
to a degree,
if it's an off-field thing, does it affect the?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think that's for each person to decide.
What's the level of, right?
Yeah.
Because the fun is you want to root for and cheer on the players that you're watching, and at some point it becomes it's too much to root for this guy, and so then it's like, well, okay, I'll root for everybody else on the team, but hope he does bad, and that's where the inner conflict comes into play, and you also have to look at the team as a whole too. Cincinnati did this with multiple players on multiple teams, whereas you get one bad apple on a team where, as we know, talking about news, the bad stuff gets covered and the good stuff gets overlooked. And so you've got, so many players on these teams that are doing such amazing things in the community. And so you have to factor that in too, as the team as a whole is probably good to root for. Cincinnati started fielding such a roster of malcontents that were just not good people. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I guess going off of that, like you said, Cincinnati hasn't had a good team since. I'm trying to think. Was it '89 when they were in the World?
Well,
in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, '88. But then they've been to the Super Bowl since. Now they've had a run here with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. So they've finally. Mike Brown kind of turned over the decision making to some other people, and as soon as that happened, they started to actually put together some decent teams that could win playoff games, and that's great. Good for them. It was funny because I'd moved on from them, but via social media, a lot of people, if they're in your day-to-day life, they don't realize it, and so many people reached out when the Bengals went to the Super Bowl a couple years and faced the Rams.
That's right.
And
that's right.
I was just I'd just reply back thanks, because I didn't want to send off a 10-page manifesto of why I switched teams. And again, this is so weird about fandoms. It's short for fanatic, and fanatical behavior doesn't always make sense. So I'll give you a case in point here. I always will love the Bears, childhood team, but yet I bounced around because it's I want to have fun on Sunday. So but it's a personal choice for me, and people get so bothered by that. And I had one guy that I was talking to who had, he was saying, I could never switch teams like that. I can't believe you did that. Now this guy's divorced, okay? And I'm thinking, man, if you had the same dedication to your previous wife that you had to your sports teams, maybe you weren't divorced. Now, I didn't say this to him because I didn't want to get punched in the face. But that was the thing. I'm like, how? I couldn't believe that this guy who's divorced and with wife number 2 now was giving me this lecture, this holier-than-thou lecture on why I should never, switch sports teams. And I just thought, okay, we're done here, and I moved on from that conversation. But it's like people get bothered, and I don't know why, because it's all about having fun on watching the games, and who the specific players that you want to follow and the specific teams. That's up to you, and so.
No, that's a great story, a great point of where we choose to, put loyalty or put dedication as opposed to other things in our lives that probably should be more so. Yeah. And that's, I've seen videos from Raider games, Rams games out here that, fights break out between fans. And it's like, that's the level of fandom that I don't understand.
No.
And even when being at a sport that I really like, or, watching a team that I really enjoy, I'm like, it's a sport that I'm not involved in any way. I don't know if these people have money riding on the game, so maybe they are a little bit more invested. But it's like, at the end of the day, whoever wins or loses, my life continues on the same path. And so I don't get that level of fan. Like, just because you like someone else, and I'm trying. I don't want this series. I try to stay away from politics as a whole in general. Although I think we're going to be. I want to kind of dance around the edge a little bit, because I feel like in society today, that's a big issue of personal opinions being like, you have to have mine, or you're, I just hate you and whatever. It's like, where's that conversation that we need to be having more of people? Because again, you're a team, I like the Dolphins, you like the Patriots. Great. They can play, they can win.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I don't like Tom Brady, but I don't like him in a sense of, man, I hate him because he always won. Not because, I wish death upon the man. Like,
yeah.
I don't know him.
We've been conditioned to believe that sports fandom is this, rigid, locked-in belief that cannot change for, and for whatever the reason that you're the fan. My dad grew up as a fan of this team, Team X, so I'm a fan of Team X, and I am not changing. And these are some of the most miserable people I know that hate game days and have zero fun with their sport, and all they do is complain about it. And I'm like, what is that getting you? Why sports are supposed to be fun, and being a fan is supposed to be fun. So that's how I view it. And it's funny, the guy that was giving me a hard time, and for all the people that give me a hard time about ever switching teams, I'll put my fandom up against yours any day. I've had, multiple season tickets to multiple teams. I've been to World Series games for teams that I've followed. I've been to a Stanley Cup championship of a hometown team where I'm at now when the Panthers won. But I'm a Hawks fan. But it doesn't mean I can't go cheer on the quote hometown team in South Florida. And so this rigidness that people have around their fandom makes them ultimately, so many of them, unless you're a Patriots fan for 20 years, makes you hate the sport that you're supposed to be enjoying. So it's strange to me.
No, I think, it's interesting. Right now, as we record this, the World Cup is going on. And I'm not a soccer or football fan. I don't know what your fandom is with the sport, if you've been watching the games or not. I did attend a game. I attended Switzerland versus Bosnia and Herzegovina because it was here in LA. It was 5 miles down the road. I'm like, if I get the chance to do it, I want to go. I wanted to experience the fandom of the actual fans of the sport. And we're sitting there in the stands. I'm like, even if I come out of this with a new appreciation for soccer, I can't go to another soccer game, because it'd be like going to the World Series as your first game and then going to a AAA game afterwards. If I were to go to one of the local Galaxy or LA Football Club games after this. And the fans that were there were into it, and it was great. It was a great experience. The first 70 minutes were completely boring, and the last 20 were exciting, as soccer goes. But one thing that I've gotten into over the World Cup is the YouTube video of fans coming to America, and in Boston specifically, the Scottish fans, the Tartan Army, and I don't know if you're experiencing them now. You're outside Miami. If you're going and hanging out with the Scottish, although they just did get beat yesterday as we record this, so unfortunately I don't think they're long for the Cup. But seeing the fans come together, and whether there's fans of the same team or not, but just enjoying the competition friendly.
Well, they have their own issues too, right? Because we've seen so many terrible stories about, who was it a Colombian player years ago that scored an own goal and then was killed by like the cartel people or whatever, and so there's certainly issues, just like you had referenced about like Raiders fans fighting, which they're known for. At least they were in LA in the Black Hole. We certainly see that in different countries around the world too. So, boy, soccer, you talk about fanatics and living and dying by your team. Yeah. But then the World Cup has a different atmosphere, I think, and gets away from some of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking just in soccer in general, the hooliganism, because that's more of the town versus town rivalry, whereas now it's country versus country, and it's just everybody coming and having the pride, I guess, for their country.
Yeah.
And hopefully, and I don't know why it's being this way, but hopefully it's people realizing, hey, I have pride for my country, someone else can have pride for their country, and we can just
You'd hope so,
get along.
Right?
And
on this one
fun.
planet, you'd hope so.
Whereas, but then you say, like, okay, why do you step back and say, okay, just because I root for my city, why then should I hate another city? Like, and that's something I
well,
don't
again,
understand
rivalries make the game fun. Should be.
Should be.
Rivalries that then turn into hatred, just this natural, unbridled hatred, takes away from the fun. I mean, when you hear about, I will no longer go to opposing stadiums for when I'm supporting my team, because I've had too many bad experiences, and my wife actually almost got into a fight years ago in Seattle, of all places, when Cincinnati had played up there, and we lost. Cincinnati lost, so we didn't even win. And walking out of the stadium, and she was getting a really hard time, and she was not the instigator, obviously, but it got ugly, and I'm like, what is going on? And that was years ago, and it was at that point where I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore, because there's too many fans that get drunk, and just, if you have the other jersey on, you just become this public enemy number one. When we were in Cincinnati and getting killed every week, we celebrated with fans. We had fun with opposing fans. We had awesome tailgates, and we'd invite them into the tailgate. And I don't know why people don't do more of that. But
I'll share a quick Seattle story, because I have several friends that are from the Seattle area that are huge Seahawks fans. Seahawks are my least favorite team because of them, and I like my friends, and I don't know if any of them are watching, but if you are, you know who you are. But one of them had a Super Bowl party a few years ago when it was Carolina against Denver, I believe. Is that right? Does that sound right? Is that in Super Bowl? But 9-10 years ago.
Yes,
8 years ago.
I believe so.
Okay, so friend had a Super Bowl party. I'm like, oh, okay, fine, we'll go over. Didn't realize it was actually a Seahawks party for the most part, and the Seahawks fans are just trash talking the Carolina Panthers team on the TV, and it's like, they would throw an incomplete pass, like, oh, your quarterback sucks. Like, they beat your team to get here. Why are you trash talking them? Like, and I guess that's, again, I'm going to harp on it a lot. As a Dolphins fan, I haven't had a lot to cheer for in the last 40 years. But with the exception of the Patriots in a fun way, if another team makes it to the Super Bowl, I'm not going to criticize them if they do a bad play, because you know what? They made it there. So I get that with fans too. It's like going back to rivalry. Here in LA, obviously we have the Dodgers. The Angels play 40 miles down the road, so they always do the interstate or the freeway series. Mm-hmm. Now the Angels have not been good for what was it, 2004 last time they were in the World Series with the Rally Monkey.
Yeah.
So like those games aren't, from what I've seen, very competitive. They're competitive, but they're not violent, let's say. Mm-hmm. But then you have the Giants that come into town, and there's usually, has been in the past, fights. Some fans have gotten, beat so bad into comas, where you're like, again, I question why. Why is the fanaticism so heavy that you feel like that is a proper response? And again, and maybe it has nothing to do with sports in itself, and it has a bigger social issue to look at. But
I think a lot of it has to do with alcohol and other recreational things, and I think it would make for a very interesting research study on that, to what leads to violence. But we unfortunately continue to see it in all games, except hockey. Ironically, they get all the fighting in on the ice. Everybody gets that release, I guess, of endorphins watching it, and then they're good. They don't fight after the game. So,
for the most part, yeah. Although, was it a Ducks game? I don't remember. I don't know. I thought I saw.
I would argue
recently,
though.
but, yeah.
I would argue that hockey fans are the most civilized of all the big four sports, which is ironic since all the players are missing teeth from fighting. So, who knows?
But
why.
I think, like you said, maybe it's that organized fighting where they have the rule of what you are allowed to do, and so I always question, like, when hockey players get into fights, how much of it is actually fighting, and how much of it is just a emotional
There's a performance
moment.
aspect to it. Yeah, I remember watching a Panthers game not too long ago, and there had been some kerfluffles throughout the game, and then two of the players, as they were getting ready to do a face-off, like, you could see the two wingers on the outside, like, saying, "This is happening." So, like, they knew they were fighting even before it started, and then as soon as the puck dropped, the gloves came off, and those two guys just started going at it. And I think it was just kind of like I don't know the unwritten things in hockey, but there obviously are, because when the players are deciding to fight before the play has even started, then due to things that have happened prior. So yeah, I think part of it is a performance aspect. Part of it is how a game flow goes, and I'd be interesting to learn more about that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think, especially in this age where players get traded more often, or there's less loyalty to a team for an entire career, where you have players that know each other better than just as they're actually friends, and they get traded to another team, and then they end up fighting each other, and it's like, but are you fighting because you're fighting, or again, is it performative, just part of the game? Is it strategy in a way? But
well, I definitely know with hockey being so physical, but not physical enough that, like, NFL, you're out and you can crush somebody and get away with it. That's just part of the game. And hockey is almost as physical, but you can't crush somebody normally unless and so you get this kind of tension build up. My son plays ice hockey, and he is just the nicest. He's a young man now, 15, but he is just the nicest kid, and he's never been in a fight in his life. And he got into his first one this past season, and my jaw dropped because he and another boy slammed up against the boards, and I guess they'd been chirping at each other all game, or the boy had been chirping at him, and then finally did something, and he's throwing hands, and I couldn't believe it, and it was just like, what am I seeing? My son is in a fight on the ice. Yeah. So definitely the game brings it out of the players, regardless of their temperament and personalities. So.
Now, were you the proud dad afterwards, or were you like, hey, look, this is a sport?
I talked to him. I wanted to know what had happened, and when he told me that he was defending himself, that he had taken an elbow before he started throwing hands. And so I said, well, that was, you defended yourself, you were in the right there. But certainly if he just walked up to the guy and started swinging on him for no reason, he would have got a talking to. But he was in the right there. So I was waited to decide if I was going to be proud or upset. So I was proud of him.
We've talked about football, your fandom, and we've just been discussing hockey, which again you did get to go to Game 6 of the Florida Panthers. It was Game 6, correct?
It was.
When they won,
yeah.
Yes, when they kept the cup in America.
Yeah. Yes.
USA. I went to Game 7 of the 2019 Stanley Cup Finals when St. Louis won their first cup, and again we were in Boston, so we're cheering for the opposing team, and Boston, again up until the World Cup this year, had a reputation of kind of a I don't want to say violent city, but Bostonians have the swagger and attitude.
They're tough guys.
And we had been in Boston just a few months previous to complete. That was our last 31st or 30th arena that we visited, and the people were nice as could be, and there was no problem. But I think where I'm going with this is,
it's hockey. It's the civilized fans
it's
in
hockey, but it's like
I don't understand it.
But
how it's so
seeing the
different
cup,
than it is.
seeing the cup being raised is that. Where would that rank on your list of sporting moments?
Yeah, it's up there from a live perspective because, and we have, I'm a lifelong, I've got my Hawks cup here. I'm a lifelong Blackhawks fan, which I have not kind of wavered from.
Still invited you on the show, even though.
Yeah, I have not wavered from. I hate that they're not in the same division anymore. The Blues and the Blackhawks. What great rivalries, especially back in the early 90s.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then moving down here, and my son getting into ice hockey, and the Florida Panthers are down here, and so we just kind of adopted them as team number 2. And as we're in South Florida, obviously, so it's a hometown team, and went to a lot of games, and so we were really excited when all that happened, and then excited when we had the opportunity to actually see this, and it was just something that. Not many people really can say I've seen a Stanley Cup champion crowned. I think it would have been neat to see it for any team, but it was really neat that it was our team that we had supported. Now, obviously, if it's the Hawks, if it's Blackhawks, it's maybe number 1. Short of back when the Bears won back in '85, and I obviously wasn't there, but watched it on TV. So it would certainly be moved to the very top of the list if it was the team that I was just diehard, live and die by. But it was really neat to be there and to celebrate with the fans because we are part of that Panthers community on a periphery level. Unless the Hawks are in town, we're going, we got all our gear, and we're supporting the Panthers. So then to see that happen and know the players, again, this goes back to the NFL draft and knowing the players when they start their career, learning about their stories. The NHL draft is this Friday, and I'm so stoked. Will have passed when this airs, but same thing. Now see all these young players, and no matter where they go, I now know. So I'm seeing when the Hawks play the Blues, I'll know more about the Blues players having studied a little bit about the NHL draft, which I do as well. So it's rooting for players. It's kind of getting to know players on a more personal level when you get into the minutia of a team and watch the content that they put out and get to know personal stories of the players. So it's this amalgamous thing that you're following the team, but then it's getting to know your team personally, the players, their stories. That's when you really, I think, you get to the fanatical level, which is hopefully is fun when you're doing it on a level that's exciting and fun and not out of hatred or misery.
I've gotten back into baseball over the last couple seasons because my girlfriend is a big Dodgers fan, and so it seems like pretty much during baseball season, I would say 95% of what we watch are Dodger games. Mm-hmm. And so the last couple of years, I've gotten to know the players more than I had in the previous decade of living in LA. And it does make watching games better because you see the dynamic between the players. You get invested in the actual player. Again, hearing their stories, hearing Last season, start of the season, Mookie Betts, when they were in Japan, came down with a severe illness. Seeing him come back and play, Freddie Freeman's kids, hearing struggles they went through, his wife went through. It's like it's going to be a stupid statement, but it humanizes people, which then makes it better. And so, I think that, and then that fandom has led to me reading more baseball-inspired books, especially about the Dodgers. And, growing up, I know about Tommy Lasorda. Did not know his past before the Dodgers when he was managing minor leagues. And it's interesting then, also, I read a book a few months ago, which I'd recommend to you, called Where Nobody Knows Your Name, which is all about a season in the minor leagues. And talking, and it was written, I can't remember, I think it came out in the mid-2010s, and it's talking about the Gwinnett Braves one time. And they just the manager got to tell Freddie Freeman he was going up to the Braves. And I'm like, I know Freddie now, but I don't know that part of the story. And it's, and I think, that makes sense. Like I said, when watching football, I know names, but I don't know stories. And so that's why maybe football isn't as ingrained, as I'm not as fanatical about that as it could be. So,
well, I don't want to harp on it, but the NFL draft or whatever draft of your favorite sport plays a big part of getting to know the stories behind the players, and it humanizes them before they even get to your team or whatever team they're going to, because in the era of free agency, they could very easily be on your team in a couple of years. So even if you, so if you like a player, kind of follow them on the periphery while you're following your own team, and who knows where they land, they might end up on your doorstep. But that's great, and it is right to say it humanizes them, Chad, because they are larger than life, and we sometimes view it, like I said, as this whole collective, the team, and you forget that these are guys that then this is a job, and then they go home to their wife, to their kids, to whatever, just like we do, right? And so we seem to forget that they just they show up on our TV on Sundays or whatever, and then that's it. And then where do they go? I don't know. It's like they're normal people with all the same complications in life, probably with a bit more money and a bit more drama. But it's great to say that it humanizes them, and that's part of being a fan, I think, is learning that stuff.
You mentioned free agency and a lot more money, and over the last, I don't know how many years, I'm going to say 20 just for a round number, sports contracts have gotten a little bit higher, a little bit different. We don't see the age where, again, a lot of players stick with one team out of loyalty, perhaps. Yeah. And the high cost of contracts, which I think, if a team is going to pay a player like, say, Shohei Ohtani, $700 million, that money's got to come from somewhere. And, I thought this stage in life, I would be at a point where I could afford to go to games more often. But we look at Dodger tickets, the upper deck, the cheapest seats, minimum $100 now. How does that affect, or does it affect your fandom in any way of being being able to afford to take the family to a game?
It doesn't. Yeah, it does affect it. We no longer have season tickets. Down here in Miami, we got season tickets to the Dolphins, had it for a couple of years, and then we stopped because of COVID. But then when COVID was over, we looked into it, and the prices had gone up so much, and we were like, we can't do that. And so we stayed home and we watched it, and we'd invite friends over, and we'd try to still create a fun game day atmosphere that you obviously don't get from being there, but you do your best as a fan to try to recreate it. And how am I going to spend my Sunday watching this team, and what do I want to do? It is a shame, and what's the biggest shame, Chad, is I don't think the money for those contracts are coming from the ticket sales. The money is mostly from the TV revenue, and whatever all these crazy deals now with the streaming platforms that they're making. That's been usually the biggest source of revenue. So the ticket price going up is, I think, ticket gouging more than anything. It's changed so much. There's not even traditional box offices for a lot of teams. I know the Florida Panthers, you can't go. You have to buy through SeatGeek to buy the official tickets. You can't. There is no box office to walk up on game day and say, I'd like to buy a ticket. They will tell you to log onto your SeatGeek app and buy a ticket. That's it. And of course, so automatically you're paying fees for a ticket that you're standing at a box office and want to go to the game, and you can't do it without additional fees. So I will say, I mean, it's a definite bummer. It's a buzzkill as a fan. As long as the stadiums keep getting filled, which they are, teams will keep doing this. So $100 now for upper deck seats might be low end right now compared to 5 years from now, as long as those upper decks are filled. So yeah, it is. Families are being priced out for sure. My son he loves hockey, but he's not big into some of the other sports, especially football, which pains me to. He likes it. We've watched some when the Bears were in the playoffs this past year. We watched the game and stuff, and so I'm a proud Chicago boy. And even though we don't live there, we still have family there and make annual treks up there and take in our Blackhawks game every year. But I think that if we had the means to go down, the disposable income to go down to more Dolphins games, he might be a bigger football fan because of how what a neat experience that is. So they priced our family out of it, and and this is not just football, as you mentioned, baseball. So it's everywhere, and it's concerts too. It's America right now partially. It's not just specific to sports or specific to one sport, but it's sad, and it I don't know if it affects our fandom now as old men. We are who we are, but I think you might see it trickle down to, when baseball, who's already struggling for how many years they've been saying, we're struggling with fans, we're struggling to, well, a sure way to not get the next generation on board as fans is to price their families out of the games. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah,
no, and going back into wrestling, because, again, you and I...
Oh, big time there,
Kevin, what we paid to attend WrestleMania 28, which I don't even fully remember, but if it even got us into the stadium now, it would be in the upper decks, and we were in the lower bowl.
Our plane tickets were cheaper than what a ticket would be right now.
Yeah. And that is a sport that I think is more family, or is very family driven. Mm-hmm. And again, like you said, if you can watch on TV and you can become a fan, but I think being there live, and for me, when Mike and I started doing the quest to see all the NHL arenas, I was not a hockey fan at all. I thought the idea was one of the dumbest things I'd ever heard. But I wanted to travel, and I wanted to see places I normally wouldn't get to see. So I'm like, sure, why not? And again, because at the time we were getting tickets, cheap for $20, $30.
Best deal in town, yeah.
But now I don't know, and that's a good point. That spoiler again, his interview will already have come out, but it's being recorded after this. But it's a good concept to ask. Would that quest be feasible today? But my point was that going to San Jose made me a hockey fan. Being in that arena, seeing the giant shark head come down from it was a religious experience. And, but had I not done it, had I just watched hockey on TV, I'd be like, oh yeah, hockey's on, cool. So, this is where I guess with the owners and the players reps and everything, like, are they not, where's the thought process in the price point and saying like, oh yeah, we've got a full stadium, but at what cost down the road?
It's it costs more to park at a Dolphins game now than a game ticket pre-COVID cost.
Wow.
If that gives you an idea of over the past 6 years how much it's increased. I think, Chad, the problem that we're dealing with too is you have owners that don't know what real life is when it comes to like you and I.
Cost.
Has no clue. You're telling me that Ross can understand an ounce of what our lives look like as middle class Americans. Stephen Ross, the owner of the Dolphins, and all the team owners are like that. They've and apologies to the one that lived the American dream and started with nothing. But as far as I know, they're all incredibly rich and it just don't. So yeah, I would love for an owner to come out and say, we're focusing on fan friendly prices. I know the only effort I've seen in the past couple of years to do this is the Atlanta Falcons with their food, because that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
This stadium food. I mean, you're talking about tickets just to get into the game and how pricey it is. And if you're a family, or even if you're not, you still want to eat while the game, you still want to have a drink or whatever.
Yeah.
You're then shelling out another $100 or more. If you've got a family of four, you're talking $125 for crap food, just garbage convenience store style, food that's been deep fried and then sat under a heat lamp for whoever knows how long. It's unbelievable. And the Atlanta Falcons did like a family friendly pricing schedule. At least I don't know if they still do, but for a couple of years they did it, and people were like just applauding them for it and saying, I can actually get a burger for $8 and not $20, which most stadiums will charge you for, and things like that. It's just unreal. And again, like so many other things in this country, if we would just say no, we're not doing it. If fans would go to the games and say, holy cow, you want me to pay $30 for 4 crappy chicken fingers and cold fries and another $10 for a bottled water for my kid? I'm not doing that. And then if everybody did that, they would lower their prices. But we just don't do it. Everybody's like, we're here, we're doing it, whatever. And so
this will be the last question to wrap up, because I like that idea of, the fans have to take a stand. Otherwise, things are going to continue as is. But how realistic do you think it is for people to say no? Because, mentioned concerts earlier, and I'm going to have you back on later on because we talk entertainment as well. Concert prices are insane. Wasn't Olivia Rodrigo? It was Ariana Grande was just out here. The secondary market value, which again is not set by, technically isn't supposed to be set by the artist or management, but the secondary ticket prices, the cheapest tickets behind the stage were $500. In front of the stage cost more than my monthly rent. My question is, who's buying these tickets? But face value tickets alone, if you can get them for most concerts now, it's $100, $150 to get into the door. Right. But I feel like people want to go for the experience, for the gram, for clout, whatever. Will it ever be, we always talk about Disneyland raising prices and you're going to price people out. But then they go oh, no, we had record attendance this year.
Yeah.
Is it feasible to think at some point fans will have enough? Or what is it going to take to get people to say, no, I'm not going to do it?
I'm not kicking the can down the road for this answer. Yeah. I truly believe it, and it goes back to what I had mentioned about maybe then if you're not growing your fan base for future years. Certainly with us, no, there's enough of us. Gen X is here, and there's enough of us to satisfy the greedy owners and promoters that are charging these ridiculous prices. So no, I don't think that there's any sign of us. I never thought I'd see the day where a parking ticket cost as much as a sporting ticket. Just the right to be there to buy a ticket, right?
Yeah.
So, no, I don't think in our generation we're going to see this great movement where people say, "Whoa, our stadiums are half full. We better lower the prices." No, they're always full. But then 30 years from now, when our kids are not going to all the games that we might have gotten to go to or did go to as adults when we could afford it, so they're not craving that game day experience because they do have all the 4K or 10K, whatever the K is when they're our age, when they can create this amazing experience at home to watch a game, then they might maybe then. But even then, there's just so many people and so many fans. The game has gotten so big, football, but really all sports have gotten so big that except maybe like I said, baseball has been struggling. Obviously not in LA, and in most major metropolitan areas that have had some modicum of success, they're doing okay. Baseball will be the only thing where you will see not a full stadium almost every night, but you also it's so many games, right? So that's games, yeah. And during the week, and so that's understandable. But just as a whole, sports in general, no, I don't think the ticket prices, unfortunately, are going anywhere down. I think will just continue to go up, and maybe it'll take the next generation who didn't grow up at those games that want to get the season tickets or want to shell out $500 to $1,000 just to take their family of four to a game. It's nuts. Yeah,
it's insane. All right, well, Travis, thanks for being on the show again. We have many more areas of fandom to discuss, so I'm sure you'll be back in a future installment. Any last words? Any last promotions? Any other than Go Hawks that you want to?
If you're a fan of movies, give us a listen. Like you had mentioned at the top, the Still Up All Night podcast, found on all your major podcast providers. We delve into, we're no longer are we only looking at the B movies of the past that appeared on USA's Up All Night with Rhonda Shear and Gilbert Gottfried, but we're looking at newer B movies, and our upcoming movie is the new Toxic Avenger. And we went back and covered that one years ago. So we're going to take a look at the newer one now. So give a listen to that. And I'll just implore people, enjoy being a fan. And that's the whole point of it. If you're not enjoying it, you're doing it wrong. And maybe you need to kind of reevaluate how you're approaching your fandom or who you're approaching it with. It's okay if you want to switch and follow another player. It's all okay. And so, but just have fun doing it.
Agreed. And as we like to say here, question everything.